Hey, what's up guys? I'm BTC. Today we're going to talk about the potential buffs and nerfs for Sombra, because she's in a really odd situation. She is one of the best characters in the game, while simultaneously being one of the worst. It's a really weird situation for the character that had one of the most long and drawn-out introductions of any of the Overwatch lineup. A long series of hints which ultimately led to her official introduction at BlizzCon last year. Now, some people liked this, most people didn't, and a revised version of this basically gave Blizzard the new template that they use for introducing a character. In addition to that, I'm going to go over some things that might help you improve your own gameplay with the character. And just a quick reminder, I am doing a $20 Steam gift card giveaway this week. More details at the end of the video. Alright, so let's get into this. Sombra is one of those characters that only really works for a certain small group of players. In this way, she is kind of the same as Torbjorn, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. Allow me to explain. Torbjorn can be very strong for the lower skill bracket players. This is because Torbjorn has a turret that will automatically target and shoot enemies. So even if the player using Torbjorn has the worst accuracy in the world, his turret will still hit the same amount of targets as it would for any other player, regardless of what that player's level of skill is. This means that it's very strong for those lower skill players because it supplements their own shortcomings. But in the higher ranks of play, the turret and its usefulness becomes severely limited. In the lower skill brackets, players have trouble dealing with the turret, but a stationary target is simply no match for a Grandmaster player and will be very quickly destroyed. Another thing that benefits the Torbjorn player is the disorganization of the enemy team. The less the enemy team is coordinated, the more powerful the turret can be, the more effective it can be. Coordination among players tends to be quite poor in the lower skill brackets and quite good in the high skill brackets and extremely good in the pro level tournaments. Both of these factors, accuracy and coordination, make it so that the turret is strong in the lower brackets and very weak in the higher brackets. So why am I telling you all this? This is supposed to be a video about Sombra. Well, you see, Sombra is the exact reverse of all of that. If you look at Sombra's pick rate and win rate on the competitive ladder, it's among some of the worst in the game. Oftentimes, it is the worst in the game. But why is it then that Sombra is almost a must-pick in pro tournaments? It has to do with the fact that Sombra is extremely powerful with an organized team that coordinates with her abilities, and she is absolutely worthless on a disorganized team. Most of the characters in Overwatch can at least be somewhat effective on a disorganized team. Their abilities and their strengths may not be used to their maximum potential, but they can still be somewhat effective. This really isn't the case with Sombra. Another factor that causes problems is that people treat Sombra as if she actually is a real offensive character instead of what she really is, which is a support. I really don't understand why Blizzard decided to put Sombra in the offensive category, as her actual damage is some of the lowest in the game. Sombra definitely should have been placed in the support category, as the primary benefits that she gives to her team are going to be utility and supplemental healing, or heal denial. So because so many of the average players often miscategorize Sombra, what ends up happening in many of the matches on the competitive ladder is that rather than having Sombra fill in for one of the other supports or in a healing role, the team will often try to make her fill in for one of the damage roles, and needless to say, this usually ends quite badly. Because of this, Sombra is generally viewed as just trash DPS or even a troll character. People see a Sombra and they instantly think that the person using Sombra is just trying to throw the match. However, players in the much higher ranks, like Grandmaster and Top 500, are much better able to adjust their lineups to suit having the Sombra on their team. But the character shows its real strength in the pro-level tournament, especially in the assault-style maps like Hanamura. Sombra has a ridiculously high pick rate, above 80 or 90% in most cases. These pro-level teams are able to use the character in an organized strategy that doesn't just make Sombra viable, but makes her potentially one of the best characters in the game, at least for that style of map. That actually brings up another issue, but we'll come back to that later. You see, when using Sombra, your teammates must frequently use the health packs that you have hacked. This allows Sombra to build up her ultimate at an absurdly fast rate and gives your team a pretty significant ultimate charge advantage. For the average player on the competitive ladder, you can tell your teammates to use the health packs, but chances are they're not going to. Instead, they will usually almost always rely on the actual healing players like Mercy or Ana that are on your team in order to bring them back to full health. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that they never use the health packs. They still will use them every now and again, or if it happens to be right in front of them, but they don't use it nearly as much as they should be. This means that for the average player, it takes significantly longer to build your EMP, one of the best ultimates in the game when it comes to a momentum-swinging fight. That brings us to the next thing, which is when your team takes advantage of Sombra's other abilities, namely Hack and EMP. In the high skill ladder or pro tournament, almost every hack is used effectively. The moment of a critical hack on an enemy Reinhardt or another important target, the entire team is able to focus and eliminate whoever was their priority, whether it was that tank or a healer or a certain DPS or something. Your team will focus and take advantage of those hacks. But for the average Sombra player, that just isn't the case. Even hacking an enemy Reinhardt who's defending a choke point sometimes isn't even enough for your team to push through that choke. Even with the entire enemy defenses going down, your team still might not be able to coordinate or to focus enough to actually move through the choke. And of course, the same goes for Sombra's ultimate, the EMP. When used by pro players, this usually results in wiping the enemy team, or at a minimum making a significant amount of progress. Again, that's because the team is organized and coordinated. The moment that EMP goes off, the entire team swarms in like a bunch of angry bees, but the average Sombra player just doesn't have that sort of coordination with his team. Usually, that Sombra will just throw out an EMP at the most random time, or whenever it happens to get built up to 100%, they just instantly use it. And as a result, it has little or no effect. And also, don't forget, it takes that average Sombra player a lot longer to build the EMP because none of his team is using the health packs that he's hacked. So real quick, let's bounce back to that map situation that I talked about earlier. As powerful as Sombra can be in those assault-style maps like Hanamura, Anubis, Volskaya, and Horizon, she is incredibly weak in most of the others. There are a certain number of King of the Hill maps where Sombra is also very powerful, but for the most part, her strength lies in those assault-style maps. This has to do with the relatively small area and the easily accessible mega health packs. So while Sombra can have some usefulness in the other payload and hybrid maps, she is mostly relegated to just the assault-style Hanamura type maps. So all the stuff that I mentioned creates a very problematic situation with the character. She can go from being nearly worthless in some cases to extraordinarily powerful, and this all depends on what map you're playing and how organized your team is. So if we say that Sombra is bad in most cases, that means she should get a buff. However, because she is so very strong in these other specific situations, any buff that you would give to her would make her ridiculously strong to the point of being just completely and totally overpowered. Now, since Blizzard is spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars to build the Overwatch League, it makes sense to balance their characters around the higher tier of players. But at the same time, it's generally not a good idea to have a character be largely worthless to the majority of your player base. Sombra definitely needs some kind of a buff as she is dragging far behind the rest of the heroes. However, it may require a slight nerf to something else so as to not make her so overpowered in certain situations. So any kinds of buffs that you would give would need to really help that kind of disorganized situation and not really do a whole lot for the already organized situation. So you could do things like improving the invisibility. Make it so that, one, you don't get decloaked whenever you take damage. This would mean that the average player could now use invisibility as an escape tool, something that you simply cannot do right now. This would greatly help the average Sombra player. Another thing would be to get rid of that cooldown that you have after you decloak. There's a very short time frame where you can't actually do anything after going from invisibility. Get rid of that, allow the Sombra player to attack immediately. This would help, again, the average player much more. It would definitely help the pro, certainly, but the average player, I think it would be significantly more beneficial to them. Another thing that would significantly help the average Sombra player and his disorganized team would be if that passive was shared to the rest of the team. And I'm talking about when you can see the critically hurt enemies through the walls. Allow everyone on your team to see that, and that is going to make Sombra significantly better for the average player. The high-level players, the pros, they already know where that soldier is. They already know that he's at critical damage. Why? Because they're sharing all of this information. Now, they may not know exactly where he is, but they have a pretty good idea, and they can use that information the way they need to. But for the average team, which lacks the communication and just the organization, being able to share that passive wall see-through would be incredibly strong. So those are just some of my ideas. In any case, it's a bit disappointing that one of the most anticipated and hyped up characters is normally considered a troll pick. Alright, so real quick about the $20 Steam gift card giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber, hit the notification bell, and then leave a comment down below. At the end of the week, I'll pick a winner, and I'll include you in either Saturday or Sunday's video. So what would you do if you could change Sombra? What kind of buffs, nerfs, or redesigns would you apply to the character? Let me know in the comments. Also, don't forget to check out my Discord server. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, all that stuff. The links are down below. Thanks for watching. Remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.